Good afternoon. Today is October 28th, 2025, and it is 1:45 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from the Lake Point Estates house. So this is basically the headquarters of my counterintelligence consulting company, which is the publisher of the books. So I'm located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. And this house is about 300 feet away from Robert Mueller's house. So his house is right over there. So today, well, I'm recording this video for multiple reasons, right? So I'm testing the setup. I basically created a second satellite node, and I'm making an asynchronous network with the multiple nodes that I have, right? So this is a way to avoid interception. I'll go into more detail about how it works later. I mean, in a different session. But this session, I'm making it because I think I discovered something important, right? And I've learned, and I think they're suspecting that I know, that I figured it out, right? And it has happened in the past, right? In the last 2 years, that when things like this happen, if they get desperate, right? Like if they see that what I discovered or uncovered is too damning, right? They may take, or they may want to take extreme action, right? Sometimes even physical action. So I've learned that it's better to say it as soon as I can, right? So that way I take away the motivation of, harming me. So I'm making this video to record this observation, and so it's recorded. Yes. So so let me see how I frame this. So I've been doing, right, and as I mentioned, I think in one of the previous videos, with the super ear, using the super ear, I figured out how to reduce the physical footprint of my technique, right? And I've been doing that for a few days, and in the process, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it would make this session too long. But I just, want to put it out there, right? So these are observations based on data, and that analysis of that data with the resources that I have at hand, right? So I'm not 100% sure on this, right? But it seems to me like this is the case, and I'm going to, put the information out in case, somebody like an investigator from the government comes across this information, right? They have something, kind of a starting point, right? Yes. So all this started because of the observation of the heavy physical surveillance on the important network points for this network, right? Like, so this illegal clandestine network that they have, right? Global network that they have. And because of that, I started taking measurements. I started focusing a lot on those areas, right? Because if they're surveilling them physically 24/7, it's because there's something that they fear that could be discovered, right? So I started taking measurements there, and there's basically 3 observations, right? That I'm going to put out there, right? Again, this, I have no way to be 100% sure, but if I had to put a number on it to this, right, I'm about, I don't know, I would say 89% sure, right? Almost 90, right? Based on the data that I'm seeing, right? But I think this is a job really for an investigative agency, like, I don't know, the FBI and the FTC, right? To see if this is the case, right? So the first observation is that it seems like they are operating a ghost cellular network. It seems like they have, the best way I can describe it, it looks like a small cell phone operator that is not known by anybody but by them, right? Um, so it would be like a ghost cellular network, right? I think that would be the best name to give to that thing. Um, and it has some interesting characteristics. And thinking about the data I'm seeing and seeing this as a possibility, right? Very likely possibility. It would make sense, right? Like they operate this parallel society, right? It's a society, but they are operating, right? They have their parallel economy, right? They have their parallel fleet of vehicles with a special meaning in the license plates, right? That individuals that are not part of the network don't have a special meaning in the license plates. They have their parallel economy, right? Based on crypto and the crypto payments that are recorded in the financial ledger that they have embedded into the geo index. So it makes sense to have, and they have their parallel internet, right? The parallel internet and apps and everything, right? So it makes sense to have a parallel cell phone operator, right? I don't know how I didn't see this before. I mean, how I didn't suspect this before and took these measurements before, right? So I feel a bit silly in that sense. So that's observation number one. They seem to have a parallel cell phone system, right? But again, I think it's a job for authorities to investigate, right? To see what is that they're doing in those towers. But the second observation is related to that. Is that and this, I mean, I should probably say this, right? By my education, right? I went to university, to school, for electrical engineering, right? So that's that's what I went to school for, right? But then I dedicated all my working life to writing software. I never worked one day as an electrical engineer. And my minor was in electronics, right? So that's how I learned a little bit how to program when I was in university. So at university, right, I remember I saw some courses about telecommunications, right, and power distribution as well, right. And this was a long time ago, and I don't recall all the details. But one thing I remember is that when you were designing telecom systems, you were always trying to optimize for minimizing. Let me check something here real quickly. Yes. You would always aim for minimizing noise and interference, right? Because these telecommunication systems are very sensitive to that. So if you want to design or pick the location for a cell phone tower or cell tower, you would take into consideration things like the noise floor in that area, right? Things like that. And I remember that from the courses about power distribution, that the high tension power lines, that those high voltage power lines, the big ones, right? The fact that there's so much current traveling through those power lines, it creates how do you say that? It creates like second order signals. Like it creates distortion in the radio frequency spectrum, right? So you would naturally, right? I mean, I've never worked designing cell phone towers, right? So I'm not 100% sure about this, but it seems to me counterintuitive that you would put a cell phone tower next to a high voltage power distribution line, right? That seems counterintuitive because, well, the power line is going to create radio frequency noise that is going to affect the equipment and the quality of the signal. It's not if you can avoid it, you should avoid it, right? Yes, these towers require power, but you don't have to put the tower in the middle of two power lines, right? You can put it 500 meters away or a mile away, right? But anyhow, the second observation is that most of these towers, in Katy at least, are located right in the middle of these high tension power lines. So the high tension power lines, in some cases, even, like these are like huge posts, right? Like, I don't know how tall they are, but like they're huge. Right? Like, they would be the size of a small building, right? Probably. And usually they have like two posts, right? One on each side, and then they have the lines. And in some occasions, these cell phone towers are located in the middle, in between the two power lines. Right? I mean, it looks like if they were designed to get interference, right? Like if they were trying to make this situation bad, right? And I remember maybe like 3 months ago, I was traveling with my former partner on the car, and we were driving on. This is just another data point, but this observation of these days made me remember this. We were traveling on, I think it was the tollway, the West Park tollway, right? We were traveling in the direction, like as if we were going to the downtown from Katy, and I remember seeing a high tension tower, right, holding high tension power lines at a high altitude, and I saw, because it was one of these exits that are elevated, right? So we were going to take the exit, and we had to like go on a ramp, and as we were in the highest point of the ramp, this high tension this high tension power line was basically at the level of the car, right? And I could see the top of it, and at the top it had an array of cell phone antennas. And I remember saying to my former partner, this is super strange. I mean, who would put a cell phone, right, antenna on top of a high power line, right? High tension power line. Because of the noise problem, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. It works, but it wouldn't work as well as, the quality of the signal wouldn't be as good as if it was on a low noise area, right? Without disruptions, is what I'm trying to say. And I remember I saw that and I said, this is weird, right? But I didn't pay much attention to it. But, so that's the second observation, right? Now, let me show you, and I'm sorry, my setup here is a little bit, amateur, because I'm just setting this up today. So, I don't have my equipment. But let me share my screen with you, right? Okay, so one good example of this is this antenna over here. It's very close to my home at Valley Side Drive, right? So you see, and you can get an idea of the size of this. You can see the shadows of the post, right? So I'm not talking about these small ones. I'm talking about this huge one, right? It's huge. It's really huge. And here's another of those posts, right? And you can see they go straight to where this cell phone tower is located, right? And this observation repeats in many cell phone towers in this area. Okay. Now the third observation is about my neighbor Robert Mueller. Remember, he has a dedicated power line, and I have photos taken with the drone, right, that show this better. But you can see these shadows over here, right? So his house is this one that has this cement structure on the back, right? So the address is 24926 North Point Place, Katy, Texas, 77494, right? So that's his house, and the house where I'm recording this video right now is here, right? The 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. But the observation with Robert Mueller house, and this is an observation that I made maybe, I don't know, 9 months ago, right? he has this power line. So you see the post, right? You can, I mean, they removed the post from the Google Maps image. So but the shadows are still there. So these black things that you see here is actually the shadow of the post. And the post goes to his backyard and ends right here, right? So this is the last post of that power line. It doesn't go anywhere else. So this high tension power line goes straight into his backyard and terminates there. It doesn't go anywhere. And this is a tremendous anomaly, right? Why would a company send a high tension power line that goes directly to a backyard of a person and doesn't go anywhere else? It doesn't distribute any power to anybody except for that backyard, right? And at the time, I hypothesized that, well, maybe this, maybe he has equipment in there, right, doing stuff that requires a lot of power, right, and that they didn't want to have that, that energy meter tied to the house, right, because then people would, could say, well, what, it could be an anomaly, right, and somebody could look into that. But with the observation of the cell towers and the ghost cellular network, right, or the possibility of that cellular network existing, I have to revise my hypothesis. I think what this really is a point-to-point connection, right? So this power line that goes straight into his backyard is really a communication connection wire, right? It's a way to establish a communication link using wires, which is the most secure way of communication, right? Like it cannot be intercepted over the air. And I believe what they're doing is modulating the signal using the electricity line, right? And this makes more sense. I mean, maybe he has equipment, right, that he's powering in that house. But one thing that I couldn't figure out with my previous hypothesis, right, it was one box that didn't check. It was that it seemed to contradict the laws of, the third law of thermodynamics, right? The reason I say that is because, well, assume that it is a power line and the intention is, I mean, it is a power line, right? I'm not saying that it's not, but imagine that the intention of the power line is to deliver a lot of power to that house. Well, whatever it would be, right, that he has in there consuming so much power, would have to transform that power into something, right? Like the energy cannot just disappear, right? It would have to be transformed into either motion, like kinetic energy. So he would have to have something rotating, right? Like, I don't know, a turbine or something, right? Or it would be transformed into noise, right? And then we would hear equipment, machines running in that backyard, right? Which is not the case. Or it could be transformed into something that generates heat, right? Like, for example, if you have a farm of servers, right? Right, you could consume a lot of energy, but that would generate that basically would generate a lot of heat. Like the energy has to transform into something, right? And that heat has to be dissipated, right? So we would see exhausts, ventilation systems, pipes running water, right, to circulating water to cool the equipment, things like that. And nothing like that is visible, right? So the question I had in my mind, 9 months ago was, well, what is happening to this energy, right? Where is this energy going, right? And I couldn't figure it out. So the revised hypothesis is that maybe this is not really something to power high power equipment, but it's a way to send information using the wire. And this is an old school technique, like this technique of. So the idea is, I'm fuzzy on the details. Like I saw this in university, maybe I don't know, 25 years ago, right? More, 28 years ago. So in AC, right, alternate current, the voltage is a sine function, right? The voltage goes up in a phase and then goes down in another phase. And in that variation, and I think the frequency between the peaks here in the US is 60 hertz, right? That's why when you fly on a plane, you see the lights and they seem like they're, like flickering, right? Those are the 60 hertz. So the idea is, in between those peaks, you can modulate data, right? That you can send data in between those peaks. You can modulate a signal. Of course, you are limited to that bandwidth, right? So this is very low frequency communication, right? So I can't recall the formula, right? But it's proportional to those 60 hertz, right? So you can send just a few bytes per second. But it's not an internet connection, but it's a way to send low volume communications in a way that it's super secure, because this is a high voltage tension power line, right? Whoever touches that line would die, right? Nobody's going to come across, to try to connect the cable to demodulate the signal, right? And it's a connection that is point to point, right? Like it's going. So it's going from one of these, power distribution centers directly to his home, right? So there is no risk of interception, right? So that would explain that. Now, so the hypothesis is that they're operating, right? This, I would call it a ghost, a small cell phone carrier, right? That probably they use, the agents of, Bizarro, of the 7. And that's the reason why they have to pass the power line close to the tower, because they can route messages that come from the air or from other means, right? Or short NFC, like whatever, right? But the last mile communication, or the last few miles communication to Robert Mueller's, for example, is, wired. So that's not prone to interception. So it's a hybrid. What I'm trying to say, it seems like it's a hybrid network that it's combining over the air for everybody else, but for him is wired. You see, for him and for some other people. So there is, and here you can see this. This is another observation, right? So if you zoom out, right? Because one obvious question is, well, where is this power line coming from, right? So you can see there is another house at Lake Point State, also like 200 feet away from my house, that also have this mysterious power line coming into the backyard, and you can see it right here, right? You see the shades? So here's one post, and the other post is right here in between, like right in the fence, on the fence that separates the two houses, right? The location of that post is more or less latitude 29.756047, longitude -95.804722. And I haven't seen visually, right? I have to check which one of the two houses the power line is actually going to. Like I have to look with the drone, right? But if I was to guess, I would guess this one, because it ends in 0, right? And 0 is generally a more important channel because it handles financial data. I would guess it. I mean, the two houses are marked in the geo index, right? And the two are agents, and I sent the books to both of them, right? And I reported to the IRS both of them. But if I was to guess who is using the dedicated communication line, I would think it's probably 2410, right? Because of the financial angle. But you see, it's very strange that in Lake Point Estates, there's not one, but two houses that have this dedicated power line coming directly to that house, right? And if you trace, because the next question is, okay, and what is the company that is handling this power line? Because they have to be complicit, right? They have to be in it. Like they have to provide this infrastructure. Well, you can follow the posts, right? And they trace to this company, I think it's called, let me tell you the name. They have a small facility here, N-Store, right? They have a small facility here, and you can see that the posts are coming from that thing, right? Oh, and they have the two flags in Google Street View as well, right? So, if you had any doubts, what happened to it? Yeah, you see the two flags in there. Okay. So that's the theory, right? So the theory is that it seems to be a hybrid network that has over the air. It looks like, from the data I'm seeing, it looks like a cell phone carrier, but it's not. And any known, I mean, it doesn't match any cell phone carriers that I know of, right? It could be that I'm seeing incomplete data. It could be, it could be that my readings are corrupted. There could be explanations, right? But it seems high confidence, right, to me. That's why I'm saying it. But the other observation is that that's probably the reason why they have to pass this. Let me switch windows 1 second. That's probably the reason why they have to pass the power lines right in the middle of the cell phone tower, right, or next to it, to be able to make this, hard wired link, right, of communication, so it doesn't have to go over the air in certain segments, right? And some of these cell phone towers, and this is not an anomaly on itself, right? These cell phone towers do have, usually, sometimes, right, they have point-to-point over the air, like directional connections, and many of them here have them, right? So it seems like a hybrid network, a multi-channel, really, right? That combines cellular, point-to-point over the air, and wire modulated low frequency using high tension, right? So that's the reason why those power lines go there, right? And that would explain why we don't see heat, exhausts, noise. We don't hear noise, or anything that implies transformation of energy, right? Like cooling systems or anything like that. Because the intention is really not to deliver power, but I mean, yes, it's delivering power, but it's doing that just to get the data that it's embedded into the design function of the power transmission. But it's super interesting, right? Now, of course, that tells, if that's the case, that means that he is really there, right? Like, because at some point I asked myself, well, the question, well, maybe it was his house, I don't know, at some point, but he's not there, or like, somebody's using the house. I don't know, right? But to maintain that super secure communication infrastructure, right, based on high tension, so nobody comes close to the line, right? It would mean that he has to be there, right? Because otherwise they would have taken it apart. But anyhow, it's just it's a theory, of course, right? I cannot go and connect a cable to check, but I thought I should mention this, and I'm going to, of course, upload it, just so they don't get any ideas, right? So anyhow, I'll keep working on a couple of things here, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.